Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Speedball for hooking me up with doing this demo and for providing all the supplies you're going to see me use today. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to show you guys 3 different methods for screen printing. The first one is, I think, probably the easiest and also the quickest. So you're going to actually see us create a screen and be printing, hopefully, within 20 minutes, half an hour here. So let's see. There it is. Review what we're making today. So the first layer that we're going to do is going to be the stencil method. And just to kind of give you a little preview of where we're going, the first 2 layers are going to be a heart background for this little robot, like a white background, so you can see this. There he is, our little hug bot. I had no idea when I made this artwork how much a hugging robot that couldn't transmit disease would be relevant in the next year, but I think everyone needs him right now. So he's going to be our top layer, and then behind him are going to be 2 different layers of hearts created in 2 different methods. So to start out, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and turn on my second camera here. So in a second, you should be able to see my table. There we go. Okay, so here's my printing table that I'm going to be working on. And so to start this off, we're going to be using the Bienfang marker paper. And we're going to be cutting our stencil out of this. So ultimately what screen printing is you're just creating a really fancy stencil. You are deciding as the artist which holes of the screen are blocked and which holes are not. The holes that are not blocked, ink is going to go through this screen and be printed onto paper. And the holes that are blocked will not be that ink there. So that's kind of the basic concept of what we're doing. So I'm going to grab one of these sheets of paper. And I have also heard that you can use freezer paper for this as well. The reason that this paper is so great is it's kind of meant to absorb a little bit of moisture and not buckle. Because when we put ink, kind of a big flood of ink on this paper, we want it to be sturdy enough to hold up to that. So the first thing I'm going to do to get started is I just want to be aware that this paper is a little bit bigger than the printing area of my screen. So this screen has an 8 by 10 inch printing area, and this paper is slightly larger than that because it's letter size. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw just to let me know. I don't want to draw any part of my design in a part of the paper that's not going to print. So that is roughly the printing area that I have available to me. Hopefully the camera is picking that up. And then the other thing I want to be aware of is my design. So I'm going to have this close. So you can kind of see through this paper. It's not quite as thin as tracing paper, but it's nice because you can still trace designs. So I'm just going to kind of center my ultimate final layer. And just get an idea. And there's his arms, just so I have an idea of where he's going to sit and how big he is relative to what I'm drawing. And then the last thing I want to be aware of is the size of my squeegee. So here is the, so when I print, my design will be on the screen, and I'll be using the squeegee to push the ink through the screen like this. So anything that I cut out that's larger than this squeegee won't print because the squeegee won't hit it. So I'm just going to kind of leave this here just as a size reference for myself while I'm drawing out my stencil. So I want to do kind of a heart, pretty like densely big heart background here. And ultimately what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be cutting out all these hearts. I don't want them to be too close together because, you know, it's going to be a stencil. So if there's not enough paper in between them, then it's just going to be really thin. And I could just go ahead and freeform start cutting, but this is better because, you know, I can decide to change this design anytime I want before I cut it. Here. This looks a little unbalanced. Put one there. Yeah, that's pretty good. So this is going to be my first layer. My last layer will be on top like that. I'm pretty happy with that. So let's go ahead and start cutting. I've got a healing mat here that I'm going to just put underneath. Oh, and I should also check just to make sure that this is all going to print. So do you guys see what I'm looking at here? The whole height of my design is going to fit underneath this squeegee. So when I print, everything will actually print. If it was bigger, you know, none of this would print because none of that ink would go through the screen. You'll see exactly what I mean when I demo that for you. So now I've got an X-Acto knife and I'm going to disappear from this view up here because I'm going to go ahead and sit down. And let's start cutting these out. So the nice thing about this technique is you can just get really bold, really clean shapes with it. So if you're someone that appreciates graphic design, you just like to work with big bold shapes, this technique is great for you. We actually started screen printing because my husband Dennis was really into spray paint stencils. Paintings using spray paint stencils. And he wanted a quicker way to create those stencils. So that was when he learned the photo emulsion method of screen printing. Just want to try to cut not in the direction of your hands. This is so funny. I personally started out printmaking, cutting with block printing, cutting linoleum blocks, and yeah, I've stabbed myself way too many times doing that. So if you are not a person that likes lino cutting for that reason, this maybe isn't your favorite screen printing method. Or if you are a person who likes block printing and wants to try screen printing. So now see, this is what I was talking about before. I drew those two hearts a little bit too close together. So I just want to be conscious not to get too close, because then that little like membrane between the hearts is going to be a little bit too small. See that right there? Well, the other thing I wanted to mention is that this method does not allow you to have any shapes with islands. So like for instance, if I wanted this heart right here to just be an outline of a heart like that, out this middle heart here, there's gonna be nothing left for it to hang on to. So that is one limitation of it. So if you want to print letters, for instance, like the middle of a capital letter A, the middle of an O or a 0, it's going to be a little bit more difficult with this method. But for big bold shapes, it's really perfect. Well, how this is looking so far. So I'm gonna have a pretty weird color choice for this layer. And the reason I chose it, I won't tell you what it is yet, but the reason I chose the weird color for this layer is because I want to show you guys the possibility of color interactions in screen printing. So you can do something that's called overprinting, where you print transparent inks one on top of the other, and the colors will interact with each other to create a third color. I really want to show that to you guys. So you'll see what weird color I pick for this. I'm really not trying to rush because you know, I'm already clumsy enough. We're almost done here. I'm curious if most of you guys are in Canada. I think I saw someone in the chat while we were getting started who was from Hawaii, which is such an awesome, beautiful place. We actually have a print inspired by our trip to Hawaii. We were lucky enough to go there about 3 years ago. A friend of ours moved there for a short time, and we got to stay with her. We went hiking, and I went zip lining for the first time. It was such a beautiful way to see the island. Just everything there, it rained pretty much the entire time, but the color green of everything is so beautiful. Next one here. Well, this is definitely the quickest method. All the other methods that I am going to show you, I'm gonna kind of have to do those like cooking show style where I've got dry screens kind of here on the sidelines that I'm gonna switch in when we're ready to use them, because there's a lot of drying time involved. But this method, I am literally just gonna use this stencil right here that I just finished creating. So however long that took, that's how quickly you can be ready to print. Okay, there we go. There's our design. So, before I start printing, got any questions or just, let's see if I can see the chat first of all. Here we go. Aloha from Ottawa. Cool. All right. Looks like everyone, Canton, Michigan. Then you know where Madison Heights is. You are right here. Cool. I'm curious how you combine this with something like a, is it Cricut or Cricut? Forgive me. I don't know. I have never tried that before, but I feel like there is someone on Speedball's Instagram that just recently did a whole, I'm looking at Dennis, I'm wondering if you remember this. There was someone on Speedball's Instagram that I believe did a whole screen printing thing with, I'm sorry, Cricut or Cricut. So I do believe it's possible. I have never tried it before, but ultimately all you're doing is, I think after you see me do this, you're probably gonna know the answer to that or not, because yeah, I think the only thing I think is with a Cricut or Cricut, you're kind of producing this part of it. So as long as you, and actually you could screen print with this too, but it would be a little difficult. So let me show you how this works. And we're gonna set down first the paper that we're gonna be printing on. So like that. We're gonna be using Speedball's printmaking paper. And this paper is really nice. It's really thick and it just absorbs the ink so well. You don't get any kind of warping or anything like that. I'm probably gonna, I don't know, we'll see how many we print. I'll just kind of leave this open over here. But this is gonna be our first piece. And so that's gonna go down first. Next, we're gonna place the stencil. I kind of want to center that in the middle of the paper. And then place our screen. on top. And I realized that I just put like a bunch of white things on top of each other. It looks like the camera is picking that up, so that's good. Okay, so now you're gonna see my weird color choice. I'm gonna be using Speedball, Speedball's acrylic ink in processed yellow. And you might be wondering why I'm using yellow ink to print hearts. And that is because the next layer that we do is going to be magenta. And the magenta is going to lay over top of this yellow, and it's going to create a beautiful red, hopefully, fingers crossed. So the actual printing part, let me go ahead and get started on that. I'm just going to put a pretty thin bead of ink. You really can't screw this up. It's just how much of a mess do you want to clean up. Put as much or as little as you want on there. And then what you want to do when you're printing is, and no one's gonna like rip out a protractor or anything, but you're gonna hold the squeegee at approximately a 45-degree angle. I don't know if I should show this in this camera. About like this. About like this. And you're gonna press down towards the floor. And then you're gonna pull the squeegee towards you. Now I'm gonna also hang onto the screen with one hand so it doesn't move. So I'm pulling it at an angle, pushing down toward the floor, and pulling the squeegee toward me like that. So I'm going to pop this up. And there's our first print. I'm gonna go ahead and throw this on the drying rack behind me. And I wanna get like, I mean, once you do all this setup, you know, you don't really wanna only do, oh, I just, first mistake. So once you get all this set up, you don't really wanna only pull one print because that's a lot of work for one print. So after you pull, you want to do what's called a flood stroke. So now I'm pushing the ink back the other direction on the screen. See that? So now I've covered the screen again with ink. And I'm going to set it down roughly in the center of my page. And then just repeat. Pushing down towards the floor, I've got it all at an angle, pulling it towards me. And there's another print. So I'm gonna pull, I think, I don't know. Let's do a few of these. I'll do my flood stroke one more time. So flooding the ink so that the screen is full of ink. And then, so you see everywhere that the stencil I didn't cut away is blocking those holes. And everywhere that I did, there you go. It's hard to do with one hand. All right, so we've got 3 good prints. I think that should probably be good. Why don't I do one more? And then just while I do one more, if anyone has any questions, I'm going to check the chat again in a second. And I already flooded it, so it's all ready to pull. When you get in a rhythm, you know, we typically, Dennis and I, when we are printing, I think I would say we usually pull about editions of 80, 100 prints at a time. So there we go. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention too, as you can see, this stencil is, it's stuck to the screen just by the ink. I didn't put any tape on it. You don't need to. The ink kind of works as an adhesive all by itself. So since you're here to help, why don't you take that for me? And I'm gonna go ahead and check the chat, see if there's any questions, try to keep this clean. Let's see. How much pressure? Great question. You really can't push too hard. So when we're printing tiny, tiny little like detailed things, I actually make Dennis print because he has big dude arms and he pushes a lot harder than me. We also, the table that I'm printing on also tilts. So we tilt it up at an angle so it's really easier to like really lean into it and push. Now, the other thing I should mention is when you're printing on paper, you noticed I just pulled once as hard as I could. If you're printing on fabric, you actually want to pull more than once. So you want to keep putting ink through the screen over and over again, because that fabric kind of sucks up some of the ink. So if you want a darker print, you can go back and forth a few times. Can you go back and pull the squeegee across again if you missed a bit? Yes, most definitely. And actually, you can see on one of the other prints, I think I did miss a spot. I probably could have gone ahead and done that. Yeah, if you haven't picked up your screen yet, I mean, even if you have picked up your screen, you can still, I'm gonna hopefully show you later how to get a more exact like registration or lining up of two different layers. So yes, you most definitely can. It doesn't seep under. Oh yeah, because the stencil is stuck to the other side of the screen in black ink. How long to dry? It dries unbelievably quickly. In the wintertime in our basement, when it's dry down here, it's dry to the touch in a matter of minutes. You can stack up a bunch of prints, I would say, within maybe 20 minutes. I might wait a little longer than that. If it's more humid, it does take a little bit longer. If you're printing in a garage in the summertime like we are, I mean, humidity does affect it, but it dries really, really quickly. It's a water-based ink, so it does dry pretty fast. I think it looks like I got all the questions, and we're actually doing perfectly on time. So let's go ahead and move on to the next method. So get this out of the way. Okay, so next we're going to be doing the drawing fluid method. So this one is definitely going to be done cooking show style, where I have kind of a lot of screens prepared ahead of time. So the drawing fluid method is a two-step process. And I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen so I can kind of talk for a while and you guys don't have to stare at the table. So it's a two-step process. The first step of the process is very painterly. You're going to be painting your design onto a screen with drawing fluid. And this stuff, it is basically, think of this as protecting the parts of the screen that you want to keep. You want to keep those open. You want this to be your artwork. So anything that you paint, and this is going to be blue, so anything that we paint blue is going to be what gets printed later. The second step to the process is we're going to fill in all the other holes on the screen with the screen filler. The screen filler will harden and become basically impervious to water or ink. So yeah, it's probably if I just do it, it'll be better than explaining it. So let's go ahead and get started. And I do see one more question. Can you use any kind of paper for the stencil? I have heard that freezer paper works. I would probably not use like just regular letter paper because it's going to absorb the ink. If you're only pulling 4 prints like I did, it might work. I did want to mention too, the only downside to the stencil method is if you want to use that design over and over again, you can't do that with the stencil method. I basically have to throw that stencil away now. It's totally, ruined. It's waterlogged with ink. So if I knew in the future that I wanted to print those yellow hearts again, I could have cut more than one piece of paper, as I was doing it. I could have cut 2 or 3 at the same time and then I would have had it. So it is the fastest method, but that is the only downside to it. So, so I've got my next screen here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again so you can see the table. Yeah, I've got my next screen. And so I'm going to go ahead and grab a pencil. And I'm gonna grab this guy. There's my robot, because I kind of want to see again, kind of want to see how big he is. So he'll go about there. And then same thing as before, I want to have a squeegee on hand. Actually have a slightly different kind of squeegee this time. Just because, again, anything that I draw on this screen, if it's bigger than this squeegee, it's not going to print. Actually, it looks like this one might be a little bit bigger. I can pretty much do the whole screen. So, move this over. The seat again. Okay. So on this one, same thing. I think I'm gonna do same similar idea, but I'm gonna do the hearts a little bit smaller this time. And it doesn't matter how close together they are this time, because this is all gonna be painted with a brush. And I don't have to do this stuff. I just think it's nice to have, you know, a plan of what I'm gonna do here. And that looks, another little guy over here. That looks pretty balanced. Go with that. Okay, now I drew my design. I hope you guys can see this. So you guys can see. I drew my design on the top of the screen, so the side that we're going to be printing on. When you use the drawing fluid method, you have to apply both of these products on the same side of the screen. And you're going to see that when I apply this screen filler, it's easier to do it on this side of the screen. You're going to see why when I do it. So for that reason, I'm going to draw my drawing fluid on this side of the screen as well. So that's something to keep in mind. If your design has any lettering on it or anything that can't be mirrored, you definitely want to draw it out on this side of the screen first. If you're just freehanding it on this side and it's lettering, it's going to be backwards. So leave that paper under it. Maybe it'll be a little easier for you guys to see. So I'm going to open up the drawing fluid. You can see it's blue, and I don't want to put it where you guys can see it, but grab a paper towel just to set my brushes on. I'm going to do two different styles of hearts. So what I want to show you guys here is the drawing fluid method is very painterly. So if you're a person who loves paint or you love lettering with ink, this is really the method for you, because you can get like very painterly kind of effects. So see how I on purpose ran out of drawing fluid there? I hope you guys can see that, because I want that kind of like brushy effect in the screen. Let's see, let's do one like that here. So you can spend, I mean, if you're a person who is handy with a brush, you can spend as long as you want, you know, in this step. Well, drawing fluid is something that if you do make a mistake, you can just wash this out with a little bit of water and go over that spot. Not all the products that we will be using today are that forgiving. This one is. See, I'm kind of making these a little bit messy on purpose, because I just want that brushy. If you're a person that likes hand lettering, if you like brush markers, this is a super great technique. If you like abstract kind of just like textural elements, like I actually almost, when I was kind of planning this out, I almost was going to dab this all over with a sponge, because I thought that would be a really neat effect. But I ended up doing this instead. That was not good enough for me. There we go. And you see the design that I put on there was really just a rough guide. kind of want this one to have a little more of a point. You can really go in and spend as long as you want. Okay, so now I've got some brushy hearts. But then you can also get very, very exact with this method too, with the drawing fluid. So now I'm going to go in with a smaller brush. And these other hearts, I'm going to try to fill in. But I'm going to hopefully put a really clean line on them. Because if you have things that you want to do that are very clean, you know, it doesn't have to be very expressive and brushy. You can go in there with a very clean line. Now you're going to see as I'm putting this on here, there's going to be areas that are thicker and areas that are thinner. That does not matter at all. This heart is not going to look darker in this area than in this area. The camera's picking up where I'm pointing. Because remember, screen printing is just, it's a yes or no process. The holes that I'm painting, every single one of these little thousands of holes on this mesh screen here, they're either covered or they're not. So if there is blue fluid over the hole, there's going to be ink in that spot. Doesn't matter how much blue fluid, it's either there or it's not. Now this one I actually, just to show you the difference from the last method, I can make those hearts touch and it doesn't matter, versus the stencil, you know, I couldn't because it was, I mean, I could have gotten a little blocky. I have found that you don't want to use too small of a brush because the drawing fluid doesn't stay in the paintbrush like paint does. It's very, I don't want to say like, it's definitely drippier than paint, but it's not drippy. It has a property that like kind of causes it to coagulate a little bit. It's kind of like if you've ever made Jell-O and the Jell-O isn't set. That's kind of the because that's the clean line that I want. You can use this to do lettering. I almost thought of doing florals for this. I thought that would be really pretty. I got one more in this spot. And I mean, I could really go crazy. I could be sitting here printing lots of tiny hearts. And see, I kind of messed that up and I can just very easily fix that. Let's change the outline of that. This is a very forgiving kind of part of the process. Now, the thicker that I lay this on here, the longer that it's going to take to dry. So you remember I mentioned before that the stencil method is very quick. You can see that I'm like really blobbing this on here to the point that it actually just drips through. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it is going to take those blobs, those dark areas that you're seeing, a long time to dry. The nice thing about this method is you can help it along. It doesn't hurt anything to throw a hairdryer on this. Definitely would recommend throwing a fan on it. Warm it in the sun. Anything you can do to get it to dry. So I think pretty good with this. And then the one other thing I wanted to show you guys, and hopefully this doesn't, I did this outside before. I've got this brush here. It's actually made for sumi ink, Japanese ink brushing. And I used it to create a splatter effect using this stuff. Like I said, this stuff is kind of drippy and I really hope this doesn't make a big mess, but I want to create a splatter effect with this. So yeah, I like that effect, just kind of in the wrong place. So again, anything that is outside of the size of that squeegee is not going to print. And this is probably a poor idea because And that's just quickly clean up the table, but that's okay. I really like that effect. I think it's really cool. Everywhere there's a little blob of ink is going to print. So everything that's blue is going to print. So grab the towel. And now this is just going to be set aside to dry. And that is really wet. You guys can see that some of that drips through. So it's probably going to take that a pretty long time to dry. But that's okay, because I have other screens already made, so we don't have to like dry everything. But if you're just thinking about how long this process is going to take that into account. All right, so I'm just going to check really quickly and see before we print. Will I be showing cleanup of the screen with each technique? No, but everything cleans up with water. So we just have a washout booth in our basement, and all of this ink is water soluble. All of the products I'm using are water soluble, and so yeah, we just spray everything off basically. The leftover ink can be scraped up with a squeegee and go back in the jar. Absolutely, that is where all of this came from. I save all of our ink, everything, and when I have another project, I combine two colors that I've printed before. Kind of marker did I use? Kind of marker for, I think all I've used so far is just a pencil. I haven't used any other writing utensils than that. Can you remove if you drip anywhere? Yes, definitely. What paint is best to use? I will be using exclusively today will just be the Speedball acrylic screen printing ink. That's pretty much 99% of the time, everything that we use. Do you need a frame for each color? Yes. And what if you need to do gradient? I really hope that we have time, because I'm going to try to do one at the very end with the photo emulsion session. And then, yeah, you can apply it with anything you want. I don't know what it would do to like an airbrush gun, but I mean, any way you want to try to get the drawing fluid on the screen, you can get it on there. So this is a screen that I already did that is already completely dry. So we now need to do the second part of the process, which is applying the screen filler. So I am going to use for this, I'm going to use a scoop coater, and I don't know if maybe you can see it better under here, but it's just like this little trough, and it's got two end caps on the side, and when I pour this screen filler inside of here, it's going to keep everything in here without dripping. But you don't need one of these for this step. You can also just use a squeegee, but it's a lot messier because it doesn't have those end caps, so it can drip over the side. So with the drawing fluid, it's very forgiving. You can wipe it off and start over. The screen filler is not so much. So we really do need to take our time here, because you want to apply it to, again, the back of the screen. That's my choice to do it on the back. I just think it's easier, in one pass. And so we're definitely going to take our time with this. The other thing I like to do is I've got some masking tape here, and this screen has like these little grooves in it where the mesh is being held in, and that can catch like a whole bunch of ink and screen filler. I'm just going to cover that up, and I can peel it off when I'm done. Okay, so we are ready to coat our screen. So you can see, so I've got my screen filler here. Open this up, and sorry, can you guys see? So I'm going to try to very evenly, trying to look at what I'm doing and at the camera to make sure you can see. Now, unlike the ink, where it didn't really, you can't really screw it up if you don't have a ton of ink on there, you really don't want to skimp with this stuff, because if you don't have enough of this, you're going to end up with holes in your screen. This is what is going to cover up everything on your screen that's not blue. So it needs to cover the whole screen. So I think that should be enough. I'm going to kind of shake that out so it's as even as possible. And then I'm right-handed, so I'm going to flip this around. And we're going to hopefully coat its entire screen with the screen filler. So I'm going to tilt this starting at the bottom of the screen. And I hope you guys can see. I am really going to be patient. I want the screen filler that's inside the scoop coater to be touching the screen all the way across it. So I don't know if you guys can see. It's very, like if I tilt it this way, it's not moving. So I'm going to go ahead and let it tilt. And it's just flowing towards the screen. I'm going to wait until it is touching all the way across, and then I'll flip it back so you guys can see. And I'm going to lean it, like you see on that bottom corner towards me, it's not hitting. So I'm actually going to lean it this way. And I definitely can't stress enough, you really just got to be patient, because you don't want entire parts of your screen to not have screen filler on them. Okay, I think we're ready. You guys see that now? That's all the way across the entire scoop coater. And so now I'm just going to scrape this very gently, pull it across, and then when I get to the top, so see, if that tape wouldn't have been there, this would have ended up in this little groove here. So you can see that all of my design is completely covered. This area here and this area here is not, but don't worry about that. We're going to put some masking tape over top of that, and it will be fine. The other thing is, if you want to, some people just paint onto the screen directly with this. Like if you wanted to paint this in a negative image kind of way, where you just painted around each individual heart or whatever element you wanted to do, that works fine too. You don't even need to use the drawing fluid. So yeah, I think I'll go ahead and thanks. Dennis is going to take it back, put this away, and yeah. So now this really just needs to dry. So we're gonna set that aside, and I'm gonna show you a dry version of this. Voila, which is right here. So you can see how thick this drawing fluid was when I put it on, because see, it's shiny. It looks like it's wet. It's not wet. It's just, that's just how it dries. So the final step in this before we can print is we have to wash out all of this blue drawing fluid. So you can see that wherever I painted the blue drawing fluid, it was kind of protecting those areas of the screen, and the screen filler wasn't able to settle in there. So the other really nice thing about this method is you don't need a sink to be able to do this. So I don't know if anyone is an educator, or just really doesn't have a lot of space, doesn't have access to studio that we had. We didn't have access to a sink in our studio. It was almost like an office space. So all I have here is I just have, I think you guys can see this area of the screen. It's just plain water and a plain sponge. That's all it is. And I'm just gonna start to work at those blue areas. And that's all, it's just water and elbow grease. Oh, that was a little too much water there. So you're gonna see, I'm gonna kind of just give it like a quick, there's a lot of drawing fluid on this, so I'm gonna try not to bang the screen too much if I'm really getting in there with elbow grease, because you guys will be here. So you guys can see that the blue drawing fluid is being removed. It's slow, but it's happening. I started on this side because this is the side that I applied it, but there's a whole lot on the other side as well because that's where it kind of drips through. So I think what I'm gonna do is, as you've probably guessed by now, I have a screen ready. It doesn't have this in it. So I'm just gonna kind of show you, like, for this one heartlet right here, just really working at that one heart. And the reason is it's got all of these, see all the little details around it? I hope you guys can see that. The brushy areas of this heart, remember I kind of wanted to try like to get that brushy effect. If I really scrub at that, you guys can see that, right? There's some really fine detail. All of the little splatters that I threw on here, you can definitely see all of these little lines and all these little dots. So with this method, you can get really incredibly detailed, as detailed as you want to get. It's just gonna take some time and some elbow grease. I timed myself washing one of these out completely. The whole process took me, I would say, at the most 20 minutes. And again, it's kind of because I was so thick with the drawing fluid, because I really like threw it on there so thick. But hopefully you guys can kind of see how that's coming out. Still got a couple of chunks. I'm kind of, I don't know if it's easier for me to, I want to bring it close to the camera, but then it's kind of moving around. So let me just take a minute to show you guys what it looks like. Now, this area right here, see that haziness? That needs some more elbow grease. That's kind of where you can tell that the screen filler, so the darker stuff, didn't stick in there, but it needs to come out. See that? Rub that a little underneath with the sponge. And so you've really got to take a close look, identifying, see, there's another right there, identifying those hazy areas and taking the time to rub them out. Hope you guys can see this. I'm kind of got it like hanging in the air. Okay, so in the spirit of using our time for more fun things than you guys watching me scrub, I'm going to go ahead and switch now to the screen that's completely done. So if I wanted to sit here and scrub out all of that blue drawing fluid, I could then immediately print with it. As long as, you know, I mean, it probably needs to air dry for like a minute. But the mesh of the screen, it doesn't really hold water like a fabric would. Like you don't need to wait for it to dry or anything like that to print. So I could start printing with that immediately. That is not the slow part of the process. Clean up some of this stuff. Thank you. All right, and then, ta-da. So that is the screen that we're going to actually print with today. That's been completely, as you can see, there's absolutely no drawing fluid left in it at all. There's even some marks. If you look closely, you can kind of see I flipped that sponge over and I used the rough side, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing like a ton, but you can see that it held up. That screen filler is very, very durable. And once you make a screen with the screen filler, you can use it over and over and over and over and over again. Unlike the stencil method, which you can really only use once. So, just to see if there's any questions. Can you mix the ink like acrylic paint? Absolutely. I mean, I'm assuming you're thinking like, I mean, yeah, really, not only can you mix it with different colors, but you know, there's like additives you can mix in just like acrylic paint too. It's not really like, you know, there's not really like as wide of an array of things as you can with acrylic paint. But yeah, I mix it all the time. It's my favorite part. I heard that wallpaper paste is a good substitute for screen filler. What is your opinion? I would try it. I've never done it before, but I'm all for like, yeah, I know this is a Speedball presentation like you said, but I'm all for like, do things accessible to you and what you have available to you. I have never tried that before, but yeah, I would say go for it. I was trying to think. There was another. No, it's I have photo emulsion. There's another couple like things like that that I've heard of using. So now that screen only used for that design, meaning the screen filler cannot be removed. Well, not forever. You can remove this, yes, but only when you want to, when you're ready to. You can do, there's a process that's basically called reclaiming your screen, where you use another product called stencil remover, and you just put the stencil remover on the screen, and then with hopefully water with force, you can just blast that design out of the screen. Many years of us going to car washes in the cold to reclaim our screens using the car wash water. So yeah, there's basically two things you need: the stencil remover and force, water with force. So let's go ahead and get going printing this, and I will check that chat again as soon as we are finished with that. Taping. So as you saw me applying the screen filler, it did leave stripes on either side of the screen. I've taped off one of them. We've got another one right here where if I don't tape this, the ink is going to go through and it's going to leave a stripe on my paper. Same thing down here. It's a little bit smaller, but can you guys see that there? There's a line there that we're going to need to tape up. On the top here, we're fine. The screen filler went all the way through. So just going to grab some masking tape. You can also use mailing tape for this step. What I would really like to do this year is I just heard of a print shop that has a method to kind of like permanently block in these like, I don't know what, gutter areas on their screen so that they never have to use tape, which I would really, really love to try that, because, you know, obviously every time you print with the screen, you have to throw this tape away. There we go. So we're good to go. All right. So hopefully, now you guys asked me how long it takes. A half an hour. So yeah, but it's bone dry. Like I would even stack these up. So got 4 prints that we made right here. I'm just going to kind of move them over and put them in a stack so I've got them handy. Okay, now ink. I think I'm doing a pretty good on time. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up a slightly custom color for this. So Speedball makes process inks. And the process inks are already transparent. So I used the process yellow. Here is the process magenta. There. And I think someone was unmuted. If you wouldn't mind. I don't think that's our dog. No. That's not our dog, is it? So what I'm going to do is this magenta color, it's beautiful. It's really bright and really vibrant, but I actually want a slightly more subtle pink for this. So I'm going to mix in a product that's called extender base. An extender base is literally just blank ink. And I've got a little container that's actually in like an old guacamole container here. A little bit of extender base. It comes in a big gallon. That's why I ahead of time just put it in this little container. And I'm really kind of eyeballing it here. It's kind of up to whatever you want. This is basically just blank ink without the pigment in it. So I'm gonna try to do like approximately a 50-50 mix there, and I totally just eyeballed it, but this doesn't have to be an exact science. Spatula, mix that up. You're not going to be able to see, like this really won't look much different than regular magenta, probably a little bit lighter. So these inks, they are pretty thick, and you do have to take care to mix them up. That's why I didn't go crazy with the amount. I, on purpose, you know, I threw a really small amount here because I'm only using 4 prints, and it does have to be mixed really well, or you will get kind of a streaky effect. We don't want that. We want our color to be nice and uniform. I think that's pretty good. Cool. All right, so hopefully this is going to print because of the white of the paper that's going to show through it, because it's a transparent ink. It's going to be a little bit lighter pink. So, another thing I kind of need to decide is like, what do I want to be the top? Do I like that as the top? Do I like that as the top? I think I do like it better this way. I think I do. All right. So we're going to go with this as the top. I've got my stack of prints here ready to go. Now, sometimes the first print you pull isn't always great, so I'm actually going to pick, you see how this one has a couple spots missing, like you had mentioned. I could have definitely pulled it again. I'm going to do this one first, just in case my first print isn't like super amazing. I'm going to center this on here. That. And by the way, the reason that I'm pulling it this way is because the squeegee doesn't fit this way. The other thing to keep in mind is I really could have done a better job leaving room right here for my bead of ink. So those little blotches that are under my bead of ink, could get a little bit too full of ink, and they could kind of get a little bit smudgy, but I don't care because, you know, there was really no rhyme or reason to those anyway. So if they print a little bit bigger than they exist on the screen, I don't care. So we're ready to go. And I'm going to go ahead and again, angle, pushing down towards the ground and pulling toward me. And now see, I told you I knew that first one probably wasn't going to be like perfect, but what I'm hoping that you guys can see is everywhere that the magenta laid down over the yellow, you're getting a red. So the magenta ink is interacting with the yellow ink below it, and it's creating a third color. So I hope you guys can see that. You've got kind of the plain magenta, you've got the plain yellow, and then you've got every spot where they overlap. So I'm going to go ahead and, do you mind taking it off there for me? I'm going to go ahead and print a couple more. So I did already flood this. It's like I do it in my sleep now, you know? I'll put this in here. Yeah, see, that second print was much, much better. I'm doing the flood stroke off camera, which again, it's like instinctual now. Now you can see on my flood stroke, I don't know if you guys can see right there where I missed it in the flood stroke. So that probably may or may not print if I do a pull stroke now. So I'm going to go ahead and try to fix that with another flood stroke because I want all of the holes in the screen to be filled in with ink before I print. Let's do, I just smudged that one. Yeah, let's do it anyway. Whatever. One more. Last one. So I don't have to let it, because this is the last one. There we go. Cool. Okay. Yep. Go ahead and hand the stuff to Dennis. Thank you for helping me clean this off. And did you guys see that for long enough? I feel like I should have this under here, just in case you guys want to check out where we're at. So that's after 2 layers. We've got yellow done by the stencil method. We've got magenta done by the drawing fluid method. I'm going to take a quick sip of water. Okay. How do you remove the screen filler? What is the stencil remover? Alcohol. I am not sure what it's made of. It literally is just a product called stencil remover. I don't know what's in it, unfortunately. If you wanted some hearts to be a different color, could you tape over those too? Yes, absolutely, most definitely. Yeah, what a great idea. Yeah, I mean, you can make a whole screen out of tape if you want to. I've done it before. If you just want to paint like, or I'm sorry, print like something straight-sided, like a triangle or a series of rectangles, you can just make that with tape. I didn't realize there were so many methods. Thank you. You're welcome. I hope that everyone finds a method that, you know, like I said at the beginning, hopefully these methods will kind of, one of them will have a kinship or a connection to some other kind of form of art that you love to do already. Okay, last method is the photo emulsion method, which is the method that we have always pretty much only ever used. So photo emulsion is a light sensitive product. So everything that you're doing with photo emulsion, I don't want to say it's the most difficult, but it's the most finicky. You have to be very aware of how much light your screen is getting all the way up until it's exposed. After it's exposed and you're printing with it, it doesn't matter, it's bulletproof. But as you're preparing the screen and as you're exposing the screen, you have to be very aware of the amount of light it's getting. So, just gonna rearrange some things. A little bit, there we go. Okay. So, preparation of artwork for the photo emulsion method. In the stencil method, you saw that you were either blocking areas of the screen or keeping them open, right? Same thing with the drawing fluid method. You are keeping areas open by painting them blue with the drawing fluid and then blocking everything else with the screen filler. The photo emulsion method, the photo emulsion will harden and become waterproof when it is exposed to light. So I'm actually not going to coat a screen for you. Wait, let's back up for a second here. So I'm going to talk more about what's on this screen, what products on the screen in a second, but this is just a plain screen with just photo emulsion coated on the whole thing. If I were to hit this with water, all of it would wash out. I would just have a completely blank screen again. If I expose this entire screen, if I put it underneath the light, just like this, all of it would harden and become waterproof. So the only areas of the screen that would print after I did that would be these edges that we haven't taped. You would just get like a hard square with nothing. So your job as the screen printing artist when you're working with photo emulsion is, again, deciding which areas do you want to protect from the light, so covering up the photo emulsion so that it doesn't harden, and which areas you want to expose to the light. Those areas you expose to the light are going to harden and become waterproof, and they're going to become your stencil. So that's why this method we usually refer to the making of the screen as exposing a screen, because we're exposing this chemical to light. So the chemical that you're going to use is it's called diazo photo emulsion, and it actually comes with 2 bottles. Mine. It comes in it's a 2-bottle system, but it's not 2 steps. This little bottle, actually, you might even think that it's empty when you first get it. It's very, very light. It's got just a little bit of chemical in it. This is the sensitizer. You're gonna fill it up with about halfway full of water, so it's still got some room in it. And the reason I didn't do this on camera is because I've already prepared the screen, so I've already done this. But you just fill this up about halfway with water, shake it, and then you pour that, the sensitizer, into this bottle. and then it's been activated. So after you've done that, the photo emulsion actually, what a lot of screen printing artists do is they will kind of just have a day where they code a bunch of screens, and then they'll be ready for them. The only thing to consider with that is once you coat your screen, it is now light sensitive. So this screen that's been coated, spoiler alert, it's actually been sitting around here for quite a while. So we couldn't actually use this. It's basically just a prop at this point. But once I coat this screen, it needs to kind of be in the dark. It can kind of be like, you know, under like the lights of a room for a little while and it won't ruin it. Like it's not like, you know, it's not that sensitive, but you definitely don't want to just like leave it on the table and go eat dinner and come back. I'm not going to show you how to coat the screen because you already watched me coat a screen with the drawing fluid and the screen former method, and I also only have one scoop coater that's small enough to do this, but it's the exact same thing. I'm pouring the photo emulsion into my scoop coater, or you can pour it onto a squeegee if you want to, and you are coating it just like that. The only difference is with photo emulsion, you want to do both sides. So I'm going to flip it over. Same thing as I did before with the screen filler. I'm just using photo emulsion instead. Once I've done that, you want to dry it flat in a dark place. Would not recommend a hairdryer or anything. I mean, like I said, photo emulsion is the most finicky of the methods. You want it to dry flat. You can throw a fan on it, but that's about it, in a dry place until you're ready to use it. So, pretending that this screen has been freshly coated and freshly dried. It has not been exposed to light until now. I just took it out. I'm going to show you how you would expose it with your artwork. So the artwork that you choose for the photo emulsion method, it needs to be black and white. Here's artwork that we're going to use. So if you take a look at this artwork, it has no fuzziness anywhere. It has all hard edges.
I think so. I'm plugged in now.
So,
Moving around.
yeah, but I mean, this was all this was for was this.
Does it?
Very detailed, but and all of the areas of this artwork is either going to block light or it's not. It's completely opaque and completely black. So if you have an image that's not yet completely black and white, like for instance, if you have a photograph, if you think of like, if you're familiar with like Andy Warhol's work, for instance, he manipulated those photographs so that they were just black and white. And that's why he was able to screen print them, because he just made the darkest areas of the image were black, everything else is nothing. And that's why he was able to use the photo emulsion method. I am going to go ahead and, and then this is just printed on a transparency, and you can use any inkjet printer to print your artwork onto one of these transparencies. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how you would expose this screen. You need to make what I call an exposure sandwich. I actually didn't call it that, Speedball did, but you need a few things for your exposure sandwich. The first thing you need is something black, because you don't want light bouncing up off of the surface that you are using. The next thing is going to be your screen. This something black, by the way, is a little bit too small. But the good thing is you can use literally anything. You can use a tablecloth, you can use a t-shirt, a piece of fabric for this screen. Then you've got your screen, then you've got your artwork. You want it to be, you know, as straight and as centered as you possibly can, because once you burn this sucker in there, it's staying in there. So take your time getting it straight. And then we will usually put a piece of glass over the top. And this is just a piece of glass out of a picture frame. Nothing special. That just holds it down, because if you noticed, see how this was kind of like curling up just a tiny little bit? If this isn't completely flat against the screen, his feet are curled up a little bit, you're not going to get this clean line here. It's going to be either fuzzy or it's not going to burn at all. Now you can use absolutely anything to block the light. You can use, we know an artist, another Speedball Demo Artist actually, that uses leaves and plants underneath a piece of glass. I know someone that screen printed with cotton candy to make just a really cool, like fuzzy kind of cloud texture. It doesn't matter what you put under here. It's anything that blocks the light will work. The next thing that you need is the exposure light, which I'll grab right here. So, and the reason I didn't take this out of the box is because the box actually has the instructions on it. I'll show you what this looks like. Actually, I'll show you this way. No, it's okay. I'll show you under here. So this comes with the photo fluid bulb, which is already in there. And okay, maybe we won't do that way. Sorry. You can look in this camera. It looks like this. So you has a little loop on the end where you can hang this up, and you need to hang this light up at a certain distance above your screen, and it tells you right on the box what the distance is. It's usually about a foot, 14 inches, depending on the size of your screen. It's right about that. And then you're gonna expose it for right around 8 minutes, 10 minutes. You really have to pay attention to exactly what it tells you on the box. So you have to suspend this light somewhere. And you know, a lot of times people are like, well, how am I gonna get exactly the distance of the light? You can also remember you can raise what the screen is on. So you can put a box underneath it or something to raise it up. But you want that distance to be exactly or as close as you can get it to what's on the box, because this process is, like I said, pretty finicky. So after you expose your screen, I'm ask you to take that for me. And that too, please. So I've got this ready to go here. So I've already exposed our screen and I've already taped it off. And I've also attached it to this really nice screen printing base. And what's nice about this is you can apply hinges to your screen so that, you know, you kind of saw I was having to like hold it down and then pick the whole thing up and put it back down. With this, I just need to pick this up, print, then put it back. It also has this little kickstand on it, so I can use the kickstand to keep it up like this, and it's not down on my prints. So someone asked me about a gradient, and I think I'm going to go for it. I know we've got about 10 minutes left, and I think I have enough time to do it. So I'm going to pick a couple of colors. I'm going to go for, this is kind of like a purpley, bluey kind of color. And I'm gonna make his head darker. So I'm gonna put a glob of ink by his head. Now, you know, like I said before, you can use as much ink as you want, but for this gradient technique, or some people call it a split fountain, I would really recommend not using a lot of ink because it gets very hard to control the effect very quickly. And then I'm gonna use a slightly lighter blue. Now these are not light colors that are, you know, these are colors I mixed myself, just from other inks. That's gonna be for his feet. Now I kind of want to create like a mixture in the middle, if possible. I'll throw a little bit more of that in the middle. And I'm gonna throw a little bit more of the dark on top, because I want like this little mixture in the middle to blend quicker. I'm just gonna put another blob on there. Okay, so the next thing I like to do is I kind of like to mush that ink around a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually use the kickstand to prop that up for me. And I'm gonna just go back and forth a few times. You can see that split. Hopefully gonna blend for me. It's happening a little higher than I would like, but that's okay. So I go back and forth a few times. Hopefully you can see that the ink is kind of blending. And the more prints I pull, the more blended that will be. So now this first print, truth be told, is probably going to be a little sloppy because I just threw a whole lot of ink through that. So I've got just like a scrap piece of paper here. This is just what I call a test print. I just keep them in the drawer. There, I'm kind of blocking your view of the camera here. That's just left over. I don't know if you guys can see this. From me going back and forth, can you see how much ink is on there? So there's way too much ink through there right now. I'm gonna go ahead and way too much. I'm gonna flood that back over top. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna need another one of those. I'm gonna try that again. There's a lot of ink under there. Yeah, see that? So we're just gonna clean that up really quick. And the nice thing about this is pull a few prints and it will clean right up. And just a little bit on that one. All right.
You want to pull another? You good?
Good. Okay. So I'm gonna grab one of our prints and I'm gonna get on the bottom, but that actually is gonna help me figure out where to put this. Right about there. Yeah, I like that. Oh, and I didn't flood it, so I need to flood it. I kind of lost the dark ink in that. So truth be told, you know, if I made it to the end without anything going wrong, this truthfully is not the best demonstration of a split fountain method because most of the dark ink has traveled past the point of my design. Let's see what this looks like. And there we go. His head is a little bit darker. Head is a little bit darker. There we go. That's our print. There it is. Cool. I definitely would have liked more of the dark ink to show through, but I mean, that's kind of where you got some unpredictable results sometimes. So what I want to do now, I hand this off to you actually. What I want to do now is I actually want to show you guys each one of the parts of the process.
Or you hand me the whole thing?
Mm-hmm. So we started out with the yellow hearts with the stencil method. This was the first layer, and I'm hoping I'll have enough room. I kind of want you guys to see them all right next to each other. Then we've got the next layer where we added the magenta hearts with the drawing fluid method, and you've got the color interaction here where you've got the yellow and the magenta forming red. And then finally, you guys can see, switch everything over, you've got our final photo emulsion artwork on top. So that was kind of the 3 layers for our prints. And yeah, that's it. So I want to check the chat one more time and see if anyone has any questions. What if you don't, whoa, that I just blew up the chat. And I'm gonna stop, we can still look at that. So if you wanted to, if you don't want to use the whole bottle of emulsion, some people keep it in the refrigerator. It does keep a little bit longer that way, but yeah, it does eventually go bad. So that has happened to us. It actually happened to us. I broke my ankle and I wasn't able to come downstairs and screen print for 6 weeks at least, 8 weeks. And so we didn't print anything for about 2 months and our emulsion went bad. And the next time we tried to print, we were like, what? It hadn't even crossed our mind because we go through emulsion so quickly. But yeah, they went bad. So keeping it in the fridge does help. If you place the unexposed frame in a black garbage bag, you can. That does work. Oops, if you do have to, for some reason, expose in one place and print, I think they actually used to do that. We used to put them in garbage bags in the car. I think we'd expose them at home and then like print at Dennis's parents' garage. Yeah, it works. Done it before. So unlike method 2, where you can use the stencil remover, you can't for the emulsion method at all. Yes, the stencil remover will also remove the emulsion as well. So the screen made with emulsion is just as durable as the screen made with the screen filler, and you remove it in the same way. The setup must be ready for when you only have a short time to get the screen out of the dark to expose it. Yes. Exactly. It's a very good idea to set up your light ahead of time, definitely. I mean, there's a little bit of wiggle room, but yeah. What is the bracketed screen called? It's just called the screen printing base. It typically comes like with some of the kits that Speedball offers. Is the screen permanently a robot now? It is until we reclaim it or put the stencil remover on it. I'm impressed your shirt is still white. This is not a shirt I usually print with. I actually put a shirt on this one. I was like, is this printing shirt too gross? And Dennis is like, yeah. I think we're pretty much out of time now. And it looks like I've answered everyone's questions. Can you use sun exposure? Yes, but I am not that good.